Coming up, another episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas. A podcast produced by Bob Rash.
Yes! A podcast that delivers a logical analysis of objective reality, grounded in rational principles. We will explore relevant facts and radical ideas based on the axiomatic principles of identity, causality, and consciousness, on reason as an absolute, on rational self-interest as a moral guide, and on the ideals of privacy, freedom, and justice. Welcome to the show.
So, when we talk about democracy, what does that word really conjure up for you? Is it just about casting a vote? Or does it reach far deeper, touching on those bedrock ideas like justice, free speech, and the rule of law?
Definitely deeper.
And what happens when the very institutions meant to protect these ideals, like a nation's highest court, begin to subtly shift? When they start blurring the lines between their judicial authority and, well, political power.
Yeah, that's the danger zone.
Today, we're going to dive into a new, more subtle form of challenge to established order. It's one that doesn't involve, like, tanks in the streets, but rather the power of pens, robes, and narratives. Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close and, frankly, critical look at recent, quite unsettling developments in Brazil. Our focus is specifically on the country's Supreme Court, known there as the STF.
Right, the Supremo Tribunal Federal.
Exactly. And its alleged profound impact on the rule of law and, maybe most importantly, the everyday lives of ordinary citizens. For this deep dive, we've gathered a really compelling stack of sources. A powerful opinion piece from the Wall Street Journal, an excerpt from a highly regarded jurist's public testimony that genuinely makes you, well, reconsider fundamental principles.
Yeah, testimony was striking.
And a detailed, thoroughly researched investigative report from a group called Civilization Works. Together, these documents paint a vivid, and I have to say, at times, chilling picture of how power can shift and dramatically affect fundamental rights. So our mission for this deep dive is clear. We aim to unpack these claims of profound arbitrariness, to highlight the tragic and very real consequences for individuals who, by all accounts, may have committed no actual crimes.
That's a key point. Ordinary people.
Absolutely. And to explore the alleged perversion of facts and the corruption of the very constitutional values enshrined in Brazil's laws, we'll trace how these events have unfolded over the past few years and, crucially, what they mean for you, the informed citizen, in understanding the delicate balance of power in any democracy.
Okay.
So, let's begin to unpack this complex story.
It's vital, I think, to begin by understanding that the threat we're discussing today isn't the loud, immediately visible coup that might spring to mind.
Right, not the 1964 kind of thing.
Exactly. Not soldiers in the streets, explicit dissolution of government like Brazil's 1964 military takeover. Instead, our sources introduce a more insidious concept, a silent coup, or as one specific document phrases it, a stiller Staatsstreich.
A silent state stroke.
Essentially, yes. That terminology is significant because it highlights the discrete, almost imperceptible nature of this modern challenge. It's a fundamental shift in power that operates without overt violence. This silent coup, it's often described as having a deeply Gramscian nature.
Gramscian, can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So, for those unfamiliar, Antonio Gramsci was an Italian Marxist philosopher. He theorized about how power could be seized not through direct armed revolution, but through a gradual, subtle takeover of cultural and institutional structures from within.
Okay, working from the inside out.
Precisely. In this context, it manifests by operating through key institutions like the courts, universities, and even media outlets. Instead of resorting to weapons and open conflict, the primary tools of this alleged takeover are pens, robes, and narratives.
Wow.
It's a profound shift occurring stealthily, almost invisibly, within the existing legal and political frameworks. And that makes it far more challenging for the general public to fully grasp, unlike, the dramatic spectacle of a traditional noisy coup.
Right, it's harder to see.
Yeah, one of our sources even suggests this makes it a scandal for the enlightened rather than a readily apparent crisis for the popular masses because its mechanisms are so subtle and complex.
That concept of a silent coup is, well, it's chilling, precisely because it operates beneath the surface. But as we examine Brazil, where do our sources pinpoint the very beginning of this subtle yet profound shift? Was there a single pivotal moment, or was it more of a gradual erosion that started to accelerate?
According to the material we've reviewed, the sands really began to shift significantly in Brazil around 2019.
2019. Oh.
This was when the Supreme Court, the STF, made what some considered a truly remarkable and, for many, an unprecedented claim. It declared itself a victim of widespread slander and threats.
The court itself declared itself a victim.
Yes. And from that declaration, a profoundly controversial approach to dealing with these alleged threats emerged, which really set a new precedent for judicial action in Brazil. What happened next was a significant, some would say alarming, departure from established legal norms within Brazil. The Supreme Court, the STF, invoked an obscure internal rule.
An internal rule, not like a law passed by Congress.
An internal administrative rule, traditionally used for administrative matters, but it was stretched, arguably, to essentially give the court the power to open secret inquiries, its own investigations into alleged crimes committed directly against its own members.
Wait, so the court is the victim, the investigator, and the judge?
That's exactly the concern. Imagine that. The court effectively appointed itself as the initiator, the investigator, and the judge in cases where its own justices were the alleged victims.
Yeah.
This move immediately triggered a cascade of red flags among legal scholars and constitutional experts.
I can see why.
It's crucial to understand why, though. This directly violated the long-standing constitutional rights of Brazilian citizens.
Yeah.
Normally, Brazilians are explicitly entitled to have their criminal cases heard and tried in local and state courts.
Right, like here.
With charges properly brought forward by local or state prosecutors, not by the Supreme Court itself, and certainly not through secret proceedings that bypass traditional legal checks and balances.
And at the center of this new and highly controversial approach, a key figure emerged. Justice Alexandre de Moraes. He was apparently handpicked to lead the initial fake news inquiry that sprang from this new rule, which is interesting because typically justices are assigned to cases randomly, right?
Yeah.
To ensure impartiality.
That's the standard procedure, yes.
Yeah.
But he was selected.
And it's also notable that Justice de Moraes was widely known for his strong opposition to the then-president Jair Bolsonaro. That dynamic, according to our sources, immediately raised significant questions about impartiality, especially given the intense political polarization at the time.
Absolutely. It looked political from the outset to many observers.
So what were the immediate concerns that arose from this specific appointment and the inquiry's early actions?
Well, the early actions of this fake news inquiry under Justice de Moraes quickly escalated concerns among legal scholars and civil rights advocates. The inquiry involved extensive surveillance of social media accounts.
Surveillance of who?
Of individuals deemed politically incorrect or critical of the court. And this went beyond just monitoring. It extended to effectively criminalizing opinions.
Criminalizing opinions, not actions.
Opinions, and even more controversially, jailing individuals preemptively without the usual guarantees of due process, like formal charges or a clear opportunity to defend themselves.
Wow. Preemptive jailing.
Yeah. Legal experts immediately and loudly voiced concerns about clear violations of several fundamental principles: judicial impartiality, freedom of speech, and the foundational adversarial system of justice that underpins any fair legal process.
Can you remind us what the adversarial system is?
Sure. It basically ensures that there's a prosecutor to present the case, a defense lawyer to challenge it, and an impartial judge to decide. That whole dynamic was completely upended here because the court was playing multiple roles.
Got it.
The profound problem, as highlighted in our sources, was that even with these glaring issues and public outcry, the Brazilian Senate, which actually has the constitutional duty to act as a check on the judiciary and potentially discipline court members, well, it largely shirked its responsibility.
They didn't step in.
Not effectively.
Okay.
This inaction allowed these unprecedented actions to continue unchecked, setting a dangerous and deeply troubling precedent for what was to come.
Okay. Here's where the story takes another sharp turn, and for some segments of the population, it became deeply polarizing. In March 2021, the Supreme Court made a truly significant decision. It annulled former President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva's 2017 corruption conviction.
Right, the Lava Jato conviction.
Now, this conviction, it's worth noting, had not only been handed down but also upheld twice on appeal.
Twice, yes.
As you can well imagine, this decision did not sit well with a particular segment of the population. Our sources specifically state that it inflamed the Brazilian right, leading to widespread protests and a sense of deep injustice among Bolsonaro supporters.
That annulment was, without question, a pivotal and, as you said, deeply polarizing moment in Brazil's recent history. It directly contributed to a significant escalation in the court's actions. Well, the individuals who were inflamed, many of whom were subsequently labeled deplorables in public discourse, took to social media to voice their intense dissent, organizing and expressing their anger. The court's initial attempts to silence these critics proved difficult, particularly because some of the most influential opinion makers were operating outside the country's immediate legal reach.
Ah, okay. So they couldn't easily reach them.
Exactly. This perceived difficulty led the STF to launch another sweeping initiative in July 2021, the Digital Militia Inquiry.
Digital militia. Sounds ominous.
It does. This inquiry specifically targeted major tech companies and social media platforms. Think Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc.
Okay. And what was the goal?
The most concerning aspect, as our sources detail, is how these companies were allegedly coerced. They were purportedly forced to censor content and to demonetize Brazilian citizens who expressed opinions the court deemed unacceptable.
Forced censorship.
The threat behind this coercion was stark and severe. Failure to comply meant these companies could face significant fines, operational restrictions, or even be barred from operating in Brazil altogether.
Wow, so comply or get out.
Essentially, yes. This represents a direct and really unprecedented assault on both freedom of expression and the economic viability of independent thought and media.
And if you thought Justice Dumares's influence was already extensive with these controversial inquiries, well, our sources reveal his power didn't stop there.
Yeah.
He then took on yet another incredibly powerful role.
Right.
He was appointed to head the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, the TSE, during the heated 2022 presidential campaign.
TSE, yeah. Crucial body.
Which, as many will recall, was a tight race pitting Lula da Silva against the incumbent, Jair Bolsonaro. This gave him immense, almost unprecedented power over the very electoral process itself.
Absolutely. Effectively putting him in charge of how Brazilians could speak and interact during the election. And under his leadership, the TSE, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, became notably more political, as one source puts it, than it had ever been in its history.
And more political? How?
Instead of merely serving as an impartial body overseeing fair elections and resolving disputes, the TSE, under Justice Dumares, allegedly began to actively monitor and censor the speech of political parties, candidates, and even ordinary citizens engaging in online discourse.
So the election authority was censoring election speech.
That's the allegation. This meant that the court, through the TSE, was dictating what could and could not be said during a crucial democratic process, a fundamental election. This dynamic fundamentally undermined the principle of open political discourse, which is, a cornerstone of any truly democratic society.
So it really changes the role of the TSE, doesn't it?
Completely. It shifted the TSE's role from an arbiter to an active participant in shaping the political narrative, with frankly chilling implications for free speech.
So when we take all of these developments together, the self-initiated inquiries, the targeting of social media, the alleged censorship of tech platforms, and the active monitoring of electoral discourse, a deeply concerning pattern emerges, doesn't it?
It really does.
Our sources consistently and repeatedly highlight the fundamental constitutional rights that were allegedly violated throughout these processes. It genuinely begs the question, how can a system claim to uphold the rule of law when it's seemingly bending or breaking its own foundational rules, the very principles it's supposed to defend?
This truly raises an important and, you could say, existential question about the very definition of justice and due process in a democratic society. The legal scholars and constitutional experts quoted across our various sources are remarkably unequivocal in their criticisms.
Like who? What are they saying?
Well, Richard Campanari, a distinguished member of the Brazilian Academy of Electoral and Political Law, stated explicitly that the STF, the Supreme Court, usurped legislative and executive functions.
Usurped. That's a strong word.
It is. And it implies not just a minor procedural error, but an alleged fundamental crossing of the lines between the distinct branches of government legislative, executive, and judicial.
Right, the separation of powers.
Exactly. Furthermore, Inio Viterbo, a respected constitutional law expert, described these actions vividly, calling them an erosion of civil liberties. Essentially, the slow chipping away of fundamental freedoms, or even the construction of an apparatus of political repression.
An apparatus of political repression.
That paints a clear picture of a system allegedly designed to silence and control dissent through legal means. And former prosecutor Dalton Dallagnol was quoted, stating emphatically, "There is no terrorist task force."
What's the significance of that quote?
It directly challenges the narrative that these expansive, unprecedented judicial actions were a necessary measure to combat some legitimate, organized terrorist threat. This underscores the core concern. When the judiciary begins to act like a political entity, actively engaging in censorship and repression, the rule of law itself is profoundly endangered.
And the consequences for individual citizens.
They can be devastating, turning ordinary expressions of opinion into alleged crimes against the state.
And those devastating consequences became terrifyingly real for many on January 8, 2023. This was the day that a large contingent of Bolsonaro supporters marched on federal buildings in Brasilia, leading to violence and vandalism inside. Now, while the court was quick to label it an attempted coup, some of our sources offer a very different perspective.
Yeah, the narrative is contested.
They described the participants as little more than yahoos in tennis shoes wandering the grounds without weapons. They point out, for example, that no soldiers left military installations, and there was no broader coordinated military support that would typically characterize a true coup attempt.
A crucial distinction, potentially.
Regardless of the label applied to the events themselves, the judicial response was immediate, overwhelming, and for many, shockingly extensive.
The response was, as you said, incredibly swift and expensive. In the immediate wake of January 8th, Justice de Moraes launched 3 new secret inquiries.
3 more.
Which led to approximately 1,500 suspects being rounded up. What's particularly alarming, as highlighted by our sources, is the duration of their detention and the disproportionate nature of their punishments.
How long were people held?
Many of these individuals were kept in prison for up to a year awaiting trial, and others, despite committing seemingly minor transgressions, if any at all, received severe sentences for minor transgressions.
A year in jail before trial.
Up to a year, yes. And our sources draw a stark contrast here, highlighting that political violence attributed to the left in Brazil has historically, allegedly, been met with a more lenient approach.
So a perceived double standard.
That discrepancy raised serious questions about the impartiality of the judicial response and the selective application of justice, with a clear focus on punishment rather than due process for these alleged dissenters. It suggested a system being used to quell political opposition rather than fairly uphold the law.
And here's where the detailed investigation from Civilization Works uncovers something truly astonishing, maybe even alarming. A secret judicial task force for mass arrests called Audiencias de Custodia.
Custody hearings.
Right, custody hearings. And this task force was allegedly operating directly from Justice de Moraes' own cabinet.
Directly from his office, yeah.
This sounds less like a standard, transparent judicial process and more like something out of a clandestine operation, completely bypassing established legal norms.
It's profoundly troubling, and the alleged mechanics of this task force are what make it so. According to the investigation, this task force apparently operated primarily via a WhatsApp group.
A WhatsApp group for judicial decisions.
That's what the report alleges, completely bypassing traditional formal legal channels and official court registries. Key members of this alleged task force, identified in the report, included Cristina Yukiko Kusahara, Eduardo Tagliaferro, Ayrton Vieira, and Marco Antonio Martins Vargas.
And how did they decide who stayed in jail?
They allegedly used an informal ad hoc system of positive and negative certidões, which are essentially certificates or reports, to determine who would remain detained and who might be released.
Positive means release, negative means stay.
Generally, yes. But crucially, these certidões were not based on standard legal evidence or formal criminal investigation in the traditional sense.
So what were they based on?
Instead, they were reportedly based on personal data and extensive social media surveillance, assessing an individual's perceived political alignment.
Political alignment determining detention.
That's the implication. To compound the issue, these certidones were often not shared with defense lawyers or even with official prosecutors, rendering them effectively invisible in practice.
So the defense couldn't even see the evidence.
Exactly. This denied the accused a fundamental right, the right to know the evidence being used against them and the ability to challenge it. This represents a clear and disturbing deviation from any transparent or fair legal process.
What genuinely stands out to me from one of our sources, the jurist Andre Marsiglia, is his profound statement about what truly shocked him amidst all this. He said it wasn't just the injustice itself.
Which is bad enough.
Right. But the deshumanização do outro, the dehumanization of the other within Brazil's highest court, that's an incredibly powerful and unsettling idea, suggesting something far deeper than just legal missteps.
It's a critical, almost chilling insight, and it connects directly to the core of what our sources are revealing about the systemic issues at play. Marsiglia expands on this by introducing the concept of ideological eugenics.
Ideological eugenics, what does that mean?
He argues that when any institution, particularly one as powerful as a high court, becomes so utterly convinced of its own righteousness and its own ideology, it begins to believe that those who think differently, those who hold dissenting opinions, simply do not deserve rights.
They don't deserve rights.
That's the argument, that they don't deserve full citizenship and are not worthy of the protection of the Constitution itself. This isn't merely a legal failing. It's a profound moral and philosophical erosion of the principles that underpin a just society.
Sounds dangerous.
It is.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the broader historical picture, you can see stark parallels to totalitarian systems throughout history, where the other was systematically stripped of their humanity, paving the way for egregious and widespread violations of fundamental rights.
Right.
When a judicial system begins to categorize people based on their political views or perceived ideology rather than their actions and adherence to the law, it transforms into a dangerous tool for political repression, not justice. It effectively declares certain segments of the population as enemies, deserving of different, harsher treatment under the law.
And the human cost of this alleged dehumanization and arbitrary process is truly heartbreaking, with real people, ordinary citizens, caught in the crossfire of political polarization. Our sources bring these stories vividly to life, making it undeniably clear that this isn't just about abstract legal principles or political theories.
No, it's about lives.
Exactly. It's about individual lives turned upside down. Let's look at some of these cases that exemplify the arbitrariness and tragic consequences. Take Valete de Silva Guardo, a 74-year-old retired woman.
74 years old.
She was initially classified positive for release by the secret task force, indicating she should be freed. But then, due to an alleged error in the system, her classification was inexplicably switched to negative, leading to her detention.
An error kept her in prison.
Apparently. She remained in prison for 21 days and suffered a severe intestinal hemorrhage during her incarceration. That's a 74-year-old woman jailed and gravely ill due to a bureaucratic error, caught in a system that prioritized speed over due process.
That's horrific. And her story, sadly, is far from unique, as our sources detail. Consider the case of Claudio Mero Soares, a truck driver. He was in prison for an astonishing 11 months and 7 days.
Nearly a year. What did he do?
His alleged crime wasn't a violent act or participation in physical vandalism. It was merely expressing Christianism against Lula's victory.
Expressing an opinion got him jailed for almost a year.
That's what the source claims. He was detained simply for voicing an opinion, not for any direct violent or criminal action. This is a stark and deeply concerning example of how this enemy penal law system.
Enemy penal law.
It's a controversial legal theory that basically posits that certain individuals deemed enemies of the state or society can be treated outside the standard protections and guarantees of criminal law. It essentially allows for a suspension of traditional due process against perceived threats.
And sources say this is happening in Brazil.
Our sources argue this concept has become a de facto reality in Brazil, where dissenters are treated as enemies.
Then there's Adenilson Demetrio de Cordova. He was labeled positive based on a tweet he posted. And what was the content of that tweet? It was simply a link to a petition for the defense of liberties.
A link to a petition.
A petition, not an act of violence, not incitement, just sharing a link to a petition. And Ademir da Silva, another individual, was also classified positive for an Instagram post stating, "Making the Constitution prevail is not a coup."
Seems like a statement defending the Constitution, ironically.
Exactly. And for showing dissatisfaction with 2022 election results, he was even classified positive for not having participated in 2018 pro-Lula PT protests.
So his lack of participation was noted.
Yes. Despite this clear positive assessment, indicating no criminal behavior, he was imprisoned for months and then kept under house arrest for over a year.
Even though he was marked positive.
Yes. The sheer arbitrariness and the disconnect between the alleged crime and the severity of the punishment in these cases is genuinely chilling. It speaks to a system where opinion, not action, is the basis for severe legal repercussions.
These cases collectively paint a deeply concerning and consistent pattern of what our sources describe as the selective application of justice. We also learn about Regina Aparecido Modesto, a pastor.
A pastor.
Yes, imprisoned for 7 months despite significant health issues. There's Darius Ruggiero, who, after fleeing police, received an extreme 16-year sentence, raising questions about proportionality.
16 years.
16. Jacquelita Freitas Jimenez, a 17-year-old student, is another example, facing disproportionate punishment for her alleged involvement. Alessandra Malvina Trindade was accused of inciting but not actually participating in the January 8th events, yet still faced severe legal consequences.
So even alleged incitement led to harsh outcomes.
It seems so. Rafael Teixeira Marquez had his passport confiscated and social media accounts blocked, effectively cutting him off from communication and movement. Idemilson de Cruz was indicted for what were described as minor transgressions, and perhaps one of the most egregious cases is Carlos Roberto Horsman, who was imprisoned with absolutely no incriminatory evidence found against him whatsoever.
No evidence at all.
None cited in the source. These individual stories are not isolated incidents. They collectively paint a clear and disturbing picture of a system allegedly used to punish dissent, to target and severely penalize individuals for their political beliefs or expressions, rather than to protect democracy and uphold the rule of law.
It really sounds like criminalizing thought.
It's a system that, according to these sources, appears to criminalize opinion and association, turning ordinary citizens into enemies of the state, regardless of whether they committed any actual verifiable crimes. This directly attacks the fundamental principle of equality before the law, where all citizens should be treated justly and impartially by the legal system, irrespective of their political leanings.
What's truly astounding, and perhaps the most damning revelation in our source material, is that we have an inside look into how this Audiencias de Custodia group operated, thanks to leaked WhatsApp conversations highlighted in the Civilization Works report.
Yeah, the leaked chats are something else.
These chats pull back the curtain on the internal mechanics, the immense pressures these individuals faced, and perhaps a troubling disregard for due process.
The messages quoted are incredibly revealing, almost shockingly so. For instance, Cristina Kusahara, identified as a key member of this alleged task force, wrote a message that encapsulates the urgent and, well, arbitrary nature of their operation. We have 1,200 people detained. Most will be freed. We can't afford to philosophize.
Can't afford to philosophize about people's freedom.
Exactly. It suggests this isn't about legal philosophy, due process, or individual rights. It's about sheer volume and a chilling disregard for the individual in the face of a perceived need for speed and efficiency. She also stated, even more starkly, we need to work quickly, because it's based on certification that we will separate hypotheses.
Hypotheses, not evidence.
Hypotheses, underscoring the informal and arbitrary nature of these sordidons that determined an individual's fate. Then there's the truly disturbing farewell message from Justice Ayrton Vieira, another alleged member of this group.
What did he say?
Complete with laughing emojis, he stated. In the custody hearings, we can give each one what they deserve. Prison.
Laughing emojis, while talking about sending people to prison.
That's what the report indicates. This casual tone, almost celebratory, conveyed through laughing emojis, suggests a profound indifference to the severe consequences for those being judged, and a troubling satisfaction in meting out punishment. It's hard to reconcile this with the image of impartial justice.
And it seems there were even internal acknowledgments of errors within this hurried and informal process, suggesting a system that was maybe struggling under its own unconventional weight.
Absolutely. The leaked messages reveal candid discussions about errors in classification, with one message stating, "The personnel are not used to this," implying a lack of proper training or a system so novel and rushed that its own operators struggled to follow it correctly.
So they knew there were problems.
It appears so. There were even discussions about removing an employee named Fred, who was allegedly not accustomed to the work rhythm, highlighting the intense pressure and the expectation for personnel to bypass standard procedures for speed.
Pressure to work fast, maybe cut corners.
That's the implication. Our sources also reveal a critical detail about Justice de Moraes himself. He reportedly refused to release people until his team had finished reviewing their social media accounts.
So release depended on a social media check.
Again, this points to an unprecedented level of scrutiny and control over individual liberties, making social media activity a determinant of freedom rather than legal evidence. And perhaps most damning, the entire Audiencias de Custodia WhatsApp group itself was deleted and then reconfigured after the leaks came out.
He deleted the group.
Deleted and reconfigured, which strongly suggests an attempt to erase evidence and, as one source explicitly states, indicates that they knew the process was irregular and went ahead anyway.
Wow. That implies intent.
It points to a conscious and deliberate disregard for the proper legal framework, potentially creating a system of justice operating outside the established law.
It seems the court, or at least this group, was also keenly aware of public perception and allegedly used it strategically. On March 8, 2023, that's International Women's Day.
Right.
A significant number of women, 149 to be exact, were released from prison following the January 8th events. On the surface, this appears to be a compassionate and perhaps symbolic act of justice, fitting for the day.
Yeah, it looks good on paper.
But our sources hint at a very different, perhaps more cynical, motivation behind these releases.
What's truly illuminating here is the internal communication surrounding that particular mass release. Messages exchanged within the alleged task force reveal that this was likely a deliberate marketing move.
Marketing. Releasing prisoners as marketing.
That's the term used in the analysis of the chats. Some internal communications even referred to the women as fáceis de imprimir, or easy to print, as in easy cases to process quickly for a public relations benefit.
Easy to print, like documents.
Exactly. Our investigation, based on the sources, could only confirm one specific case, that of Camila Mendonça Marques, as legitimately freed due to her caregiving responsibilities for her young children.
Only one confirmed legitimate case out of 149.
Only one confirmed based on that specific, legally recognized justification. The strong implication, then, is that many of the other women released that day were part of a calculated PR strategy to improve the court's image, rather than a genuine act of justice or a commitment to due process.
It's deeply cynical, if true.
It powerfully underscores the alleged manipulation of facts and judicial processes for political ends, using individual cases as leverage for public perception.
And it gets even more concerning if that's possible. Our sources uncover the alleged use of external agents or collaborators to pursue dissidents, operating entirely outside official accountable channels.
Like informants, but unofficial.
Something like that. It implies a shadow network working in conjunction with the court.
This is a critical detail in understanding the alleged perversion of facts and the scope of this silent operation. These external parties, operating without any official investigative capacity or public accountability, allegedly infiltrated private WhatsApp and Telegram groups related to the January 8th events.
So, private citizens infiltrating groups for the court.
That's the allegation. They then reportedly collaborated directly with the TSE, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, and were even said to have received direct requests for information or action from Justice de Moraes' cabinet.
Direct requests from his office to these external agents.
Yes. Figures like Salarelzo are explicitly mentioned in our sources as allegedly developing censorship concepts and actively supporting Moraes' actions and policies. This suggests the existence of a highly organized, unofficial network working in tandem with official institutions.
Blurring the lines completely.
Absolutely. Further blurring the lines of legitimate authority, transparency, and accountability. It highlights a dangerous precedent where private, unaccountable actors are apparently used to conduct surveillance and gather information that then feeds into a systematic process of judicial punishment against dissenters, fundamentally contributing to the criminalization of opinion.
So when we connect all these dots, the self-initiated secret inquiries, the alleged censorship, the mass arrests, the deeply concerning dehumanization, the personal tragedies, the WhatsApp chats, a very concerning and cohesive picture emerges, doesn't it?
It really does, a disturbing one.
Legal experts, both within and outside Brazil, have been vocal in their criticisms, and their words are truly stark, painting a picture of a judiciary straying far from its constitutional mandate.
They are, and their voices are critical. Former Supreme Court Justice Marco Aurelio Mello, a respected figure, for example, publicly called the STF's actions extravagance and nefarious.
Nefarious from a former justice.
Yes, issuing a somber warning that something wrong cannot end well. Andre Marsilia, whose profound insights on dehumanization we discussed, didn't hold back either, directly criticizing the illegal delegation of investigative powers to a tribunal and the usurpation of constitutional power. A severe accusation that the court illegally seized powers belonging to other branches of government.
Again, that idea of overreach.
Exactly. Silvio Carota, another legal voice, stated unequivocally that the entire process violated a fundamental constitutional principle, suggesting a deep breach of Brazil's foundational legal framework. And Ives Gandra da Silva Martins, a prominent legal scholar, alleged that Justice de Moraes had, through his actions, transformed what should be an impartial judicial body into a guardian of democracy.
Guardian, that sounds positive,
But the implication is a perversion of its purpose, hinting that instead of defending democracy through impartial application of law, it sought to control democracy through political means, deciding who the enemies of democracy were. If we connect this to the broader picture, the core argument advanced by these various legal minds is that the judiciary in Brazil is perceived as having strayed dramatically from its constitutional mission, instead of acting as an impartial arbiter of the law, applying it equally to all.
which is what courts are supposed to do.
Right. It is seen as operating as a highly political entity, actively engaging in censorship, repression, and the arbitrary application of justice based on political alignment. This represents a profound erosion of civil liberties, a gradual but systematic dismantling of fundamental freedoms, and a direct challenge to the fundamental principle of equality before the law.
Equality before the law.
That principle dictates that all citizens, regardless of their political views or perceived affiliations, should be treated justly and impartially by the legal system. Instead, what our sources allege is a judicial system that has become a powerful political actor, punishing perceived dissent rather than crimes, and in doing so, undermining the very foundations of a democratic state.
Despite the gravity of these accusations and the concerning picture our sources paint, there are glimmers of hope, maybe? Signs of pushback?
There are some indications, yes.
Our sources mention active attempts by the political right in the Brazilian Senate to impeach Justice de Moraes and, crucially, to try and restore judicial impartiality and adherence to constitutional norms.
Right. Impeachment attempts have been floated.
This suggests that some within the political system are actively recognizing these issues and pushing back against what they perceive as judicial overreach.
That's precisely right. And what's particularly interesting here is the growing internal and external pressure that seems to be accumulating. Our sources indicate that elites are starting to complain about justices drunk on power, suggesting a growing discomfort and concern even among those who might have previously tolerated or simply ignored these actions.
So not just the opposition anymore.
Exactly. This hints at a potential shift in the broader political and legal landscape within Brazil itself. Perhaps even more significantly, the recent decision by the U.S. Treasury to impose sanctions on Justice de Moraes.
Sanctions from the U.S.
Yes. That appears to have gotten the attention of the other members of the court. This provides a tangible external pressure point that could potentially encourage a return to the rule of law and a renewed emphasis on judicial independence.
International pressure can make a difference.
It can. It implies that if Brazil fails to find a way to reestablish the impartiality and constitutional boundaries of its highest court, there could be further international consequences, which might motivate other court members to push for change and reform. It offers a crucial, albeit fragile, hope for a course correction.
And as we consider the full scope of these developments in Brazil, it brings us back to that profound and almost prophetic warning from jurist Andre Marsilia. He cautioned that this path, this systematic dehumanization of the other, this erosion of rights for those who disagree, ends not only with democracy, not only with the rule of law, but with humanity. It's a truly powerful and chilling thought that resonates far beyond Brazil's borders, reminding us of the fragility of these fundamental principles everywhere. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's briefly recap what we've uncovered. We've explored the concerning shift towards a silent, subtle form of power grab in Brazil, where judicial authority is alleged to have dramatically overstepped its bounds and merged dangerously with political agendas.
A silent coup, as the sources termed it.
Exactly. We've examined claims of widespread and fundamental violations of rights by the Supreme Court, profoundly impacting free speech, due process, and the principle of equality before the law.
Major constitutional concerns.
And perhaps most poignantly, we've heard the personal stories and chilling details of the human cost, the tragic consequences for ordinary citizens caught in the crossfire of intense political polarization. Many face severe penalties for minor or even non-existent transgressions based more on their opinions than any actual criminal act.
Real people, real suffering.
These events have chilling implications for democratic principles and human dignity everywhere, serving as a powerful reminder of how easily foundational values can erode. As you consider these detailed accounts from Brazil, you might ask yourself, how vigilant must we be in our own societies to distinguish between legitimate authority that operates within its constitutional checks, and power that begins to operate beyond them, unchecked and unaccountable?
It's a crucial question.
What does justice truly mean when the very institutions meant to uphold it are accused of dehumanizing those who think differently, stripping them of their fundamental rights simply because of their opinions or perceived political allegiances? It's a question worth pondering deeply, I think, for the lessons of one nation's struggle with the delicate balance of power often hold profound relevance for us all.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas, grounded in reality, driven by reason, built on self-esteem, rational self-interest, and laissez-faire capitalism, produced by Bob Rash.
We'll be back